Hi, I'm Mrs.D. Math. Thank you for joining me today. We're going to be covering personal budgets in 7th grade math. So let's go ahead and get started. So let's say your parents are going to drop you and a couple of friends off at one of those really fun, exciting places like an indoor location that has bowling, arcade games, sometimes some pool tables, and maybe an area with an indoor putt-putt section. So you guys are going to go to this place. Your parents are going to leave you with $50 and a few hours to actually have some fun. So let's say the first thing you want to do is bowl, and you have $50, but you want to make sure you don't spend it all in one place while you're there, because then you're going to run out of things to do. So you want to budget your money. So you have this $50 that your parents gave you, and you can see when you come in that a game of bowling and to rent a pair of shoes is going to cost you $20. So you're going to go ahead and pay for that, and then you know you're going to have $30 left. So after you finish bowling, then it's time to go play a putt-putt game. So when you go to play putt-putt, this is also going to cost you, for an hour's worth, $15 to play a game of putt-putt. So now that you have spent $20 on bowling and $15 on putt-putt, you only have $15 left. And so the last thing you want to do is play some arcade games. And so the arcade games are going to be where you get to buy tokens. And the more tokens you buy at one time, the less they cost per token. So let's say that your options are to buy 5 tokens for $1, or if you spend $5, you're going to get 50 tokens. So spending $5 gets you twice as many tokens as if you paid for them $1 at a time. So it's going to be better for you to go ahead and spend the rest of your money. However, if you would like to buy a drink or get a snack or something like that, you're not sure, you want to save a little bit of money. So we're going to buy $5 worth of tokens. Now we have $10 left. So with that $10 left, we can either go to the snack bar, get ourselves a drink, maybe a little hot dog or nachos, and then I might have a little bit of money left to spend on some more tokens, whether that's going to be 50 tokens for $5, or maybe I only have a couple of dollars left and I'm just going to buy 10 more tokens. So any way you look at it, when you go to somewhere like this with a certain amount of money, you have to budget your money. If you don't, you might run out. So let's say you and your friends decided you were going to play 2 games of putt-putt instead of 1. Well, if that was the choice, then you would have ended up spending all $50, 20 plus the $30 for 2 games of putt-putt on just those 2 things, bowling and putt-putt. And then you wouldn't have any money left for any of the arcade games or snacks at the snack bar. So it's important when you go into a location with a certain amount of money that you spend it accordingly so that you're able to do everything that maybe you want to do, and you might end up with some money left over to play a couple extra arcade games at the end. So now that we've talked a little bit about when you have some money as a teenager and you're going somewhere, how to budget, we also need to talk about some of your expenses and the categories that they can fit into. So as an adult, you are going to have 2 categories to represent your expenses. We have a fixed expense. This is going to include things like your electricity, maybe your water, any bills that you have to pay in order to survive. And then you also might have to pay for some type of a mortgage or rent, and we're going to assume that you do not live with your parents anymore. You also need to pay for gas, which means you're going to have a car payment. If you live somewhere where you might take public transportation, you aren't going to have a gas or a car payment, but you do have to have money set aside for whatever transportation you're taking. So whether that's a city bus or maybe a subway system, you do have to pay for that. And then you also need to buy groceries. So these are going to be the groceries, the necessities that you have to have in order to just eat on a daily basis. Then we have what we would consider our variable expenses. These are the expenses that you can survive without. So these would be things that you don't have to necessarily spend money on, or maybe you don't have to spend the max amount. This would include things like maybe activities, going out with friends, going to the movies. Could also include hobbies. Not that having a hobby isn't a good thing, but it's a very expensive hobby if you want to go play golf every Saturday. Then you also need to think about things like your subscriptions, maybe to a food service. Those can get pretty expensive online. Eating out is a big expense. Then you also have sometimes cable or some type of streaming service. These are definitely not necessary. And it's really important, especially if you pay for a streaming service, that you don't have too many and you can't actually watch all of them. And you also need to pay attention to things that are recurring payments, because those would be things that you could get rid of in order to have more money in other areas for spending. Now, spending money isn't just about adding and subtracting, so let's see how this relates to math and some of the things that we have been learning about recently. So here we have percentages, and we can use those percentages to calculate how much we actually spend on each category if our take-home pay is $4,500. Now, this is just an example, but this kind of a pie chart is often seen maybe when you have a bank account. Your bank is going to take what you spend on a regular monthly basis, and they're going to break it into categories for you. So that way you can actually see how much you spend in each section, so that you can adjust things according to your lifestyle or maybe things that you need. So let's talk about, if I make $4,500 a month, that's going to be my total amount of income. So that goes in the denominator. And then when we set up a percent proportion, we always want to put our percent over 100. So let's start with our mortgage percentage, and that would be 30%. So that's out of 100. So what we're trying to solve for is how much money we actually spend out of our $4,500 a month on our mortgage or rent. So a couple of ways we can do this, but one thing I do see that I can do quickly is I can reduce 30 over 100 by taking off those zeros. So now I have 3 over 10. So now that I've reduced the right side of my fraction, I can go ahead and multiply the cross products, and I know that 10x is going to equal 4,500 times 3. So I can go ahead and solve the right side, and 4,500 times 3 is going to equal 13,500. And then my last step is to divide both sides by 10. And so this side is going to cancel out. And I know that when I divide 13,500 by 10, that 0 on the end is going to be gone. So now I can see that my 30% mortgage is equal to $1,350 a month. Now, it does make sense that typically your highest amount of spending every month is going to be on your mortgage or rent. Usually the next thing that's going to come into play is probably your car payment. We're going to include that in your bills and utilities. So the bills and utilities is 20%. If we're going to find 20%, we also have to find 10%. And finding 10% of a number is probably a lot easier. So if I am finding 10% of 4,500, I can just move my decimal one place to the left, which in this case removes the 0 on the end. So I can see here that 10% equals $450. And then I know that if I'm trying to find 20%, that's double 10%. So I can just double $450, which comes out to $900. Now, this breakdown was pretty easy because everything is 10, 20, 30%. But even if it's a different percentage, I can still use the same process. I can either solve it using this method where I would turn my 10% into a decimal and then multiply times the amount, or I could use this method we used up here first, and I can set up a percent proportion and solve for the missing amount. I'm Mrs. D Math. Thank you for joining me today for Personal Budgets in 7th grade math. Have a great day. Bye.